All right, so I'm excited. I get an opportunity to interview Martellus Bennett. He is a maker and a master world builder who has dedicated his life to the liberation of Black imagination. The Super Bowl champion, his creative knows no boundaries as a writer, an animator, a film director, educator, political cartoonist, a game designer, and an architect. His dedication to his craftsmanship is a testimony to the magnificent possibilities of the Black imagination when it works outside of the constructs of societal beliefs. Working under the moniker Mr. Is it Tamanoshi? Is that what you say?
Tomonoshi, yeah,
Tamanoshi.
Tomonoshi.
He continues to prove that the world is beautiful when the black boy dreams, and that with the right preparation and empowered imagination, every black boy can win. So tell me a little bit about this before we jump into your background, because as an athlete, I've interviewed a lot of athletes, and jumping into the world of entrepreneurship is a pretty big transition. So how did you get into this? What was the inspiration? And just give me a little background.
Yeah, so I was doing entrepreneurial things while I was playing. So I started my all companies I started while I was playing. I started writing books. I was making movies while I was playing. So it has always been my belief that you had to build the bridge before you need to cross the bridge. So while I was playing, I had time to explore and you had a lot of time to do a lot of self-discovery. Like in the off season, you train in 4 or 5 hours a day, but then you got the rest of the day and what do you do with it, right? And for me, I just was always been a maker of things. So I knew that I wanted to go into making things. Like, I wanted to make products. I'm a product guy, but I got a chance to explore all the different realms of product making. Like, do I want to do food? Do I want to do books? Do I want to do toys? Do I want to do games? And along the way, I found the things that I really love, and I just continue to make those things.
So what were you making while you were playing?
Uh, I started, so I can tell you, so when I was playing for the Dallas Cowboys, I was doing art exhibitions and galleries, but I also was in a music group, and I used to travel and perform in a music group. And then when I got to the New York Giants, I got introduced to like I saved somebody's life that fell down in the stadium, and I caught the person as it was falling from the stadium. And this was before phones was out. All these people saw it, but telling the story was interesting. So we ended up doing like this animated version of the story. And so then I was like, oh, I should be doing animation. So then when I was playing for the Chicago Bears, I had my daughter and I started writing all the children's books, the interactive children's book apps, and I made my first animated film while I was playing for the.
So hey, back up. What was the story? You what?
Oh, so like after the game, you throw your gloves and everything into the stands, and the kids will catch them, and they like, you basically everything that they want. They want everything. And this day, I remember it was cold outside. We had played the Packers, and this big old dude, I threw it up to the kid, and the kid caught the glove, and the man tried to catch it, but the kid ducked, and the man came flying over the edge of the stadium, about 25 feet or so, whatever. And in that moment, I had two choices, right? I could move out the way, or I could step up and make the play of the day. Of course, being the person that I am, I stepped up and I caught the guy, right? It saved his
Wow.
life.
Did anyone catch us on video?
It's legendary. People saw it. News, the police, everybody, all the fans saw it. Like it was. That's why we ended up doing animation because it was a time where that was it's crazy because there was a time in our life where we weren't just having our phones out for everything,
Right.
right? I was alive for that time too, so like I seen both sides of the
Right.
the world. But it was like several articles came out about it, and then we ended up reanimating it and telling a story about how it happened. So it was kind of cool. It was like
Wow.
one of those legendary stories that
Wow.
happens and once in a lifetime.
Wow. Wow. All right. So take me back a little bit. Just give me a little bit of the origin story when you were a kid, growing up, and how you got into football.
Yeah, so I'm from Houston. I'm from Houston, Texas. Grew up in Houston. I mean, in Texas, it's football, God. Well, actually, it's oil, football, and then God. That's kind of how it is here in this state. But as a kid, I mean, we just played football in the neighborhood. There was never really um, like I didn't get into it. It was just something that was happening. And it was just like, oh, I'll play. So it was just always just it's no we weren't like the kids of today, which someone push you into something and you spend your entire life trying to become a professional at that thing.
Right.
For us, it was just another thing to play with the homies, right? And we played everything. It's like if it was football season and football was up, we played tennis, we played basketball, but we didn't really have anyone organizing us, right? We just would organize ourselves, knock on each other's doors. Hey, you coming out? Or send messages the night before, and then we will go play. So that's kind of how I got into all of the sports that I played, was just the community of playing with everybody and competing. And then what we used to do is we'll take our neighborhood and we'll go play in other people's neighborhood to prove that we were the best kids on this side of the city. So I mean, we just did it as it was just what we did. Like it
Right.
wasn't like a thing. I didn't ever think about like I want to try out for football or things like that. It was always like, oh yeah, we just play football for fun and we go beat people in other neighborhoods. Same thing with basketball, you know. So we beat each other and then we get together and we go beat everybody else to prove that they can't mess with us.
So how did you know? At what point did you know that you had something special?
Well, I mean, I was I think when I got to in middle school, high school, you know, I could start taking it a little more seriously. Like we play, I used to play, like, you know, you start to figure out, oh, you could go to college. You know, you could do all these things. But as a kid, I wanted to work at NASA. I didn't, you know, like that was my thought. I thought I would be, because in Houston, NASA was bigger than the Houston Oilers to me. Like, no, who cares about the Houston Oilers? They got spaceships over there, right? Um, so for me, that was kind of like my at a young age, I was really into that. But like, I mean, I was pretty good pretty quickly. I took it seriously because you want to be the best person in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then you realize like, oh, there's other people out in the world playing. Now I want to be the best in the world. And I became the number one tight end in the world, like my senior year. So
What was your best memory from your senior year?
I was actually working out for the NBA.
Really?
I was working out for NBA teams while I was in high school too. So I was the number one football and number one basketball player in the state of Texas.
Wow.
Yeah, so I played both sports, but I think senior year, that was probably like the coolest thing to go work out for the Memphis Grizzlies and then come back to school and wear the Memphis Grizzlies outfit on campus. Like that was like really cool about my senior year, like doing both and you know, All American and all those things too.
So then you get a full ride to our Texas A&M?
Yep, I ended up going to Texas A&M. My brother was there. He's my roommate. I went there. A big part of the school was great, but a big part of the reason why I went there was because my brother was there.
Nice.
And so we were roommates in college, and we've been roommates through life, right? And roommates for life. You know, it's kind of cool now that I think about it. I'm gonna tell him that today too. Like, man, we're roommates for life. Um, and got to college, played both sports in college. It wasn't the same as high school because there was a lot more time involved in college football than trying to go back to basketball. You couldn't play basketball during the football season at all. So it was just too big of a balance with with the style of basketball which I grew up playing. And so yeah, I had a good time in college. Got to, you know, kind of got, you know, bored with school a little bit and just the whole antics of being a college athlete at the time and decided to go to the NFL.
Were you treated like royalty at college with the status of how good you were in college? Did your life change like overnight when you were playing in college?
Nah, I mean, on campus, I mean, I never really looked at it like being different. I mean, I was nice at it, but I guess so. People like me. I mean, I'm cool with people. I like the fact that I like being able to go to Whole Foods or Kroger and no one actually bother me. So I live a very normal life. I don't really try to be a celebrity. I don't act like a celebrity. So I think people treat me like a normal human being because I don't carry a celebrity.
Right.
Or now I got the it factor, right? You know, when you walk in a room, you still have that it factor, but the it factor is different from a celebritism aura. You know what I'm saying? Like anyone can have the it factor and not be famous, right? So,
Tell me what that is, because I had a conversation with the Ohio State wrestling coach. I'm friends with Tom Ryan, and I asked him that question. What is it? Like, what is the it factor? So in your head, when you say it, what does that mean for you?
I think it is a collection of things, right? Like do you know how to articulate what you're thinking, you know how to carry yourself, you know how to deal with people at all, manage people at all levels, right? You have this ability to recognize that everybody is somebody, right? Like it's not about being, it's almost like a removal of the ego. Like you're supposed to have one, but the it is not the ego. So it's like, what is it, right? It's the removal of the ego, and all it is you, right? If you could just bring yourself, all of yourself, and you don't have to wear a mask from place to place to place to place, then you have it. And it is actually nothing in a way, but by being nothing, you're able to be everything, right? It's kind of like a Taoism type thing, right? Because
Look,
once we
look,
name
look, look
something,
I hear you, but to have it, you got to be more than a humble dude. I know a lot of humble people that don't have it. What makes you unique? What your unique abilities? I mean, look, to make the NFL alone, look at the numbers, man. Like it's almost impossible to make it, right? So you have to have something that almost everyone else does not have. What is it?
oh, that's cool. I mean, I can only speak on my behalf of what my it is, right? Everybody it is probably different, right? Because everybody needs a different it,
Right.
right? Depending on what room you're in. Like an astronaut's it is totally different from, an author's it, right? An author,
But would you agree? Would you agree that if you walk into NASA and you see all those guys, not all of them have it. There are always a few.
100%,
So what
right?
so tell me some of those things and tell me maybe in the concept of like athletics or even if you want in leadership, like you're running companies now, right? So like
Yeah.
there is something that few people have that almost everyone else doesn't have. And that's kind of what I'm tapping into because again, I know how hard it is to be a professional athlete. I've talked to many of them and I wrestled in college and I know how hard it is to make a level of that. And it's such a difference between high school, college, and then where you were at, the pinnacle of a sport. And because so few people can do it, you're right. The it factor definitely comes in lots of different shapes and forms. But I'm just curious just to pick your brain outside of being humble and having the ability to communicate, which I agree. Those are special qualities, but I know a lot of people who have that and they're not it.
I don't think it's about being humble though. Like
Okay.
I wouldn't say I'm a humble guy, right? Because I don't think I think humbling is actually not a great word. Why would I try to dim my own light? You know what I'm saying? Like I'm here to shine as bright as possible. I want everybody to see my light. But my thing is I don't need to shine my light in your face. That's ego.
Right.
Right? I'm glowing whether you know or not. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to put it in your face. That's when ego comes in. But the it's just I got it. You may not know what it is, but you be like, man, that guy got it. When we all know when someone has it, I think part of it is personal systems and beliefs and philosophies, right? That belong to you, right? You carry that with you, right? That separates you from everyone else. This is what I believe in the world. This is what I think how things should be done. This is the systems of the way I want to get things done. And these are my it's my it that I bring with me are the systems in which making me of a whole ecosystem as a person, right? I think the it factor is about an ecosystem of being, right? So then you have the way that you communicate, but it needs to be you need to own it. It needs to be your voice, your tone. So I think it is just a version of people who have actually self-actualized themselves, right? I think self-actualization is the it. I think it happens fast for athletes because we are on the field and you have to actualize yourself in a physical realm, right? So you have to bring this confidence. You have to be able to step up there because if you ain't got it at the line of scrimmage, you already lost.
Right.
Right? You lost already. Like you lost because you don't believe. It's a sense of self-belief, right? A lot of people don't believe in themselves. They don't believe in the things that they believe in, right? They kind of believe it because they was told to believe it, but they ain't investigated enough to really discover if this is what I believe, right? So I think it's about self-actualization. I think the thing we realize there's not that many people in the world who have self-actualized.
So
And those
who was the impact in your life when you look back? Who jolted you to get on that path to do the hard work inside?
I think it's a collection of people. I think the foundation starts at the household. My parents allowed me to express myself and be my parents just were enablers and kind of got out the way and let you kind of do your thing. Like at the dinner table, you got to say what you wanted to say if you made sense. If you didn't make sense, you weren't allowed. Like, all right, everybody would cut you off. Like the entire family is a family of independent thinkers. Like my mom, my dad, my brothers and sisters. Great conversation, great room to be in, great people to have dinner with, great time. But then I would have to say Willy Wonka.
Tell me
I think
more.
there was something. Yeah, there was something about Willy Wonka. I saw him first time, and I was just like, man, I didn't want to be Willy Wonka. I didn't want to go to the chocolate factory. I wanted to own a chocolate factory. Like, oh man, this is cool. Like, he came out, he had his cane. The whole thing was the building was his personality. Like everything about everything in that movie was built around who he is and what he self-actualizing himself to be because of what his beliefs are. And I always would say that in my life, I try to figure out what my chocolate would be, right? And that's how I went on the path to self-discovery. And I also think that for me, I have what I call divine mentorship, right? There's a lot of people I will never be able to have a conversation with. But if I can investigate well enough, I could find someone who asked them a question that I might have wanted to ask them. And then, I could read between the lines and get answers from them through a conversation they have with somebody else.
Right.
So listening is like one of the biggest things. And I think reading is listening, right? Like when we're reading, we're listening. And treat every book as I don't agree with everything I'm reading. Sometimes I write in the margin like, this is stupid, right? But I have to continue to understand my point of view on things and not just accept something because they let anybody write books. I mean, they let me write a book. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Like, you know what I'm saying? I got 6 books now. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
if you got something to say, like, so when you read things, you don't can't just believe everything that everybody has to say, right? It's
Right.
really to challenge our principles and what we believe. And I think that's what reading is, and that's what traveling does.
Yeah. I love that. You said a lot, but I want to keep us on. I want to keep us on track. Take me through when you get drafted and you make your first big payday. Tell me about the life transition, maybe some of the struggles or challenges. Did you have people guiding you during that time? Did you make any big mistakes? Anything you want to share about that transition from college to NFL where your life drastically changed financially?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is kind of having an understanding of what money is, right? If you, depending on where you grew up, your family's relationship with money, that's how you first see money. Like for a lot of times we may grow up in a community where money is a problem. We don't have enough of it. We need to get it. You know what I'm saying? And then you can grow up in another community where you realize, oh, money just is a tool to buy tools to make more money.
Right.
Right. So you get one where money is coming in and just going right out, and then you get another one where it's able to invest in tools in order to make more of that money.
But did you have that mindset when you got your first payday?
I was kind of in the middle. I
Okay.
was still young. I was just turned 21. So I was out,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? I had the Corvette with the drop top on the thing, you know what I'm saying? Like I had it, you know what I'm saying? I had I mean, I was never really outlandish. My biggest expenses has always been in manufacturing my own imagination.
Let's
So
go.
that's where I made the most of my lessons. I don't want to say my mistakes, but most of my lessons has come from trying to manufacture a product, whether that's like trying to build a company. The biggest investment I think I would say that I learned is it's not the actual manufacturing of the product, but it's the people in which you are investing in. I feel like that's where you usually get your lowest return,
No doubt.
investing in people. So like learning how to invest in the right people around you and figuring out who's there for what reasons. And some people just do the job because they want to get paid. So like as a young person getting money, it was like when you invest in these people, when they tell you get a financial advisor or tell you to go get this person or this person, you don't really have a way to navigate that realm of who's a good person and who's not. That only really comes from experience, and no one can really tell you, right? They could try to advise you, or you could try to find an advisor, but most of your people in your life have not been through what you're about to go through either.
Right. Did you have any of the players that kind of took you under their wing?
Nah, I mean, Demarcus Ware told me one time. I came to the parking lot one time, and it was like 3 Ferraris and a Lamborghini and like this old classic car. And you come in and you got your, then next to it is a Ford Focus, right, from another player that was just a free agent. And you get this parking lot, and you got some insecurities that start happening when you pull up. You got to park your car all the way over to the left. You know what I'm saying? You got to deal with this thing. It's almost like living in LA. LA will do that to you. You'll buy a car in LA just cause, you know what I'm saying? Because everybody else got it. You're like, dang, I'm the only one that's not doing it, environmental pressures in the places that we are. But DeMarcus Ware told me he was like, one day we sitting outside and I was talking to all the guys and they were just talking about their cars. And then DeMarcus Ware goes, he's like, yeah, this is the big boy talk. You don't need to buy any of this stuff yet. Wait till your third contract. Don't buy anything of this. You can't afford this. And then they all started laughing because it's a rich man joke. You know what I'm saying? It's
Right.
like, and but that was pretty much it. I didn't really have anybody else that they all figure it out. And I think the problem what happens with us too is that like when you that young, you don't want nobody to tell you how to get your money, right? Like I self-actualize this money. Like this money exists because of the work I put in. Like no one can just give you this. This is earned. I earned this, right? Like some people say like the NFL is a privilege, but it's not. right? If it was a privilege, everybody would be doing it. Only those
Right.
there are the ones that earned it. So don't try to turn it into a privilege to make me feel more grateful for something I earned. Nah, I earned this ain't a privilege. Every day I work, I wake up and I work for it. So it's like a lot of times people be like, oh, it's such a privilege. Nah, it's hard work. Right. The privilege of this is me doing hard work. Like, what else can I tell you? That's the privileges I have. And it's every day I gotta wake up and do more hard work. And they're trying to replace me.
Right.
Every day they working another guy out to try to find a cheaper version of me in order to do the job in which I do.
Right.
And
It's good.
but yeah, that was pretty much it. I didn't really have like players don't give other players advice.
So let me ask you a question. Just being in the business world as an entrepreneur now, and just thinking about just leadership in general. When you came into the league, I would imagine that you saw lots of levels of different types of leadership from the players, the veterans, the coaches, right?
Mhm.
How would you describe what great leadership looked like from any examples that you saw?
Okay, yeah. So I don't think I would be a great of a leader as I am at work if I didn't go through all the different teams and saw the different styles of leadership, right? You have those who lead from above, right, that you rarely see. I don't think that's a good way to lead at all, right? And you have those who are the face of leadership, but they aren't the ones leading. I think that's a terrible thing because we all pick up on that very fast. Like when someone acts like the leader, but you realize that they're really just the face of leadership for someone else to tell them what to do. Never a good thing, right? And then if a leader doesn't combat that concept, right, of someone else being a leader, then you kind of lose a little respect for them because you'd be like, we in the same boat. This is the real leader, so you could kind of lose respect for somebody like that.
Right.
And then I would say that the other thing is clear communication. I hated coaches and fair communication. And when I say what fair communication is, it's to communicate to everybody the same throughout the organization. Why do you talk to this person in this way, but then you'll yell at this person, right? If you're going to yell at this person, you need to yell at this person because they're getting reprimanded for doing the same thing, right? So like this clear communication, because now everybody feels like, oh, it's not just me. And I think the best leader I ever seen that I learned so much from leadership was Bill Belichick. I think he was honest. He was straightforward. He didn't beat around the bush. He told you how he felt. He gave you clear directions on what he expected and how he wanted to get it done. He was a great communicator of what he wanted. And I had other coaches that were trying to be friends or trying to be, sometimes now you feel like you're supposed to be a friend to people that are working with you, but there's no impossible because that leadership role gets broken in friendship, right? Because who's the leader of a friend group? We all are at different periods of time.
Right.
So how do you establish a personal relationship, but also stay in a form of authoritative figure in the infrastructure of the thing? So it's like one is about laying out what is expected from each person, each role, and then also being able to tell them how you want their job done, and then get out of their way for them to find it and find new ways to do that job.
Right.
But the systems you give them, you have systems in place is great leadership. Like this is how we do this is how we do this, and a system in every single aspect of the business because they know that you understand everything which is going on. So it makes it feel like, oh, this is great leadership. He knows what I'm doing. He knows what I'm doing, so he knows where every part of the boat is happening. What good is a captain that only knows how to fix the wheel but can't fix the anchor? Now, why I'm gonna get on a boat with you?
Right.
So like for me, I think a lot of it was just about, and also you get to see strategy, right? Like a good strategy, you can't disagree with. A plan, you can. You could disagree with a plan, but a strategy, when you be like, oh, okay, I get it. And then when a strategy has a philosophy of why this is our strategy and what we're going to do, and everyone can be informed on why, how, and what.
Tell me the difference. Help me understand the difference between a strategy and a plan.
I think plans come from strategies,
Okay.
right? Okay. I think a strategy is a strategic thought on how to put everything into space. Like we have a strategy for our team, and then we have what our offense is, how we run the offense, what we're doing. But then for depending on who the opponent is, we have a game plan. And within that game plan, we implement parts of our strategy that works best to defeat this team. And I think it's the same thing with each product. Like every product doesn't have the same strategy.
Hmm.
And if we're going to take this product, but there's some values, core principles that apply to everything that we make in, that's always going to be part of that's how we build the strategy off of that. Like this is who we are. This is what we do. All right, how are we going to market this particular product using our core values, but sharing it in a tone in which it reaches the people that we want it to reach.
Right. It's interesting. How much? I'm curious to know just a little off the cuff here. The NIL, and now with kids being bought in college, and these schools are literally just paying, and now they're talking about sharing a lot of the profit with these college kids, who they're making million. I mean, they're printing money off in the basements at all these schools, and the kids don't get anything out of it. And now they're making that change. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that. And did that ever cross your mind, like that you just couldn't believe that you weren't able to make money doing this, and yet they were becoming rich off of you and your success?
Well, I used them too. So when I played, I used to sell merchandise after the games. So I had my own clothing line in college, and I used to make T-shirts. And if I had a good game, I would go out to the tailgates and I would sell T-shirts directly to customers myself. So I would use them. I mean, I wasn't making as much money as these kids were doing, but extra
Right.
$500,000 on a after a great game, that was that was huge at that time. Like we good for for a long time. I got $1,000 in my pocket, so then I go play another game, and then I started my own radio show. So I was already trying to make money in college, right? So I think that is interesting though because I think that if they're going to do this, then what they need to do, and a lot of teams don't do this, is the money management education side, right? Because like, what is money? Right? But what happens to the players, I think what's happening is like, what does the game mean to me? Right? Like the college thing was the last step of like, really shaping yourself and your love for the game to see if this is something I want to commit myself for the rest of my life to.
Right.
Because it's the NFL is hard,
Right.
right? If you got a love for it, right, deep in your heart, like for the game, if you're doing it for the things that you could get from the game, you're not gonna last very long.
Right.
So I think it's great that you're able to use your likeness coming into to college and be able to make money. But I think the kids, you see it, and I think it's going to be hard for the coaches too, because a lot of times the kids are getting paid more than the coaches,
Right.
and and then the societal pressures. If I'm getting paid more than you and the constructs of society, then who's more important?
Plus, it changes the game, right? Now teams are buying players, so it completely changes. I mean, recruiting's one thing, but money talks, right? So,
The wild thing is that the NFL, when you go to the NFL draft, it felt like the slave trade.
right.
Right? You're on the stage, they're writing these notes. You got nothing on. It looks the when you look at the slave trade imagery that from back in the day, and you look at the NFL on the players on the podium, it's the same exact system in which they use to sell off slaves. Nothing's changed. Measuring the hand size, the person announcing it, the white men in the crowd taking notes on what the sizes are of the players, things like that, what we can do, how fast they run, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same exact system. But now what's happening is now these kids are getting introduced to that system at a very young age
Right.
where, when you're dealing with it, it's like, what am I dealing with? This idea of being bought and shifted and traded and those things where, it's a lot to navigate when you're not fully developed as a human
Right.
in this aspect of it. And
Yeah.
then who's leading you to make the decisions that's best for you within the structures of what's happening in NIL. So it's everything early, very early on is always volatile because there's just not enough education around it.
Right. For sure. So, did you retire right after the Super Bowl?
Pretty much the next year, I was thought about it and then I ended up going back because I wasn't sure, but I should have retired right after the Super Bowl. I ended up retiring after the year after the Super Bowl. Um, I went to Japan on a spiritual pilgrimage and I decided I was never going to play football again.
Wow. Wow. You went to Japan?
Yeah, I went to Japan for the first time, and I went by myself. I was out there for like 10 days. I was Japanese. I was damn near Japanese for 10 days, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, and while out there, I met this lady named Miho, and Miho was fascinating because, she was my translator and guide through a lot of Tokyo and Osaka and Kyoto. And I would meet her every morning, and every morning she was just like really, really happy, like so excited to do the job. And there was a time I had played for the Packers, and My last year, I was on the Packers for a bit, and we had a practice which I did 30,000 steps in practice, and they weren't subbing me out with the second or first. I mean, the second or third string guys weren't practicing, so I was doing first team, second team, and third team reps. And I remember going off on the coach because I always wear my watch at practice just to kind of see what my heart rate and stuff is at. It's like, Coach, I'm at 30,000 steps for the day. This is ridiculous. Like, I was tired too. It's high. I'm like, why am I doing first team, second team, and third team reps? It felt like a punishment. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't do that. I'm the only one that's in every single huddle. And then, but when I was in Japan, one day I was with Miho, and we had took 30,000 steps. And I ain't complain about a single step. Right. And I was like, man, I was looking forward to the next step. And I asked Miho, I said, Miho, how often do you do this? She said, oh, I try to do this every day, Marty-san. I love it. She's like, I love everything about it. I love meeting new people. I love showing people my country. I love learning about families. I learn languages, everything from this job. I try to do it every day. And the days I don't get to do it, I'm kind of sad. And I wait, because she's like, there's a period where people don't visit Japan much. And she's like, during that time, I hang out with my mom and then I got to hang out with my husband. I thought that was really funny when she said that. And I was like, you do this every day? She said, oh, yes, every day.
Wow.
And I say, dang, mijo, I want what you have. And she was like, I don't have nothing. I said, what do you mean? I was like, you have everything. Like, look at you. You just, yeah. So that's how I came up with the word Tomanoshi. So Tomanoshi is not even a real Japanese word. I made it up. I actually own it. And it was me trying to come up with a term for what Miho had that I wanted for Miho. Nothing to read about it. There was no writing about it. So I had to develop my own philosophy for life, right? Based on what I had experienced in Japan with Miho. The one thing I did know is that I didn't love everything about football, right? Like some days I'm like, man, I gotta go up here today. More days like that, you like, then some days you look for, you love some things of it. Then a lot of it, you like, man, I don't want to deal with this. So when I came back, I started my journey of like figuring out what Miho had, and I retired, and so that I could do that and
Wow.
move forward in life. And there's haven't been a day in my life where I haven't made something. Because for me, what Miho had is the same thing I get for making. Like I love everything about it. I love reading about it. I love talking about it. I love learning about things that other people are making. I like trying making things. For me, a life of making is Tomonoshi, right? So that's what I try to do in my life, and it started in Japan.
Love that. I teach my kids the difference between being rich and wealth. And being rich in life is very different than having wealth, and I think she had a rich life, right? I mean, and there's something
She
special,
was
especially.
rich beyond my measures. I was kind of jealous. It's like shit. You can have all these things, but then you realize like, yo, life is really actually quite smaller than it seems,
Right.
right? Like,
Right. So let me ask you a question. With what you've seen happen over the last couple of years, at least for me, at least, I sold my businesses in 2022 and 2023, and I just feel like business changed. And when COVID hit and everyone's going home and working from home, and now you can work with anyone around the world, and with AI kind of hitting the way it steamrolled in, and just the amount of distraction, the amount of just things being thrown at us, and guys like you who have a visionary kind of a way of being able to see the world, there is now this capability that you can pretty much do anything you want. You have all the tools at your fingertips. There's nothing you can't do. The scarcity of knowledge that used to be is no more, because now you can just go on ChatGPT and you can learn anything you want. You can have it teach you a course. How do you filter through how to decide how to spend your time, what to focus on, so that you're not spread out, distracted on too many things?
well, to go back on this concept too of like learning things, right? Like, I think that the most intelligent people aren't the ones who hold the most knowledge in their head. It's the ones who know how to find the information when they need the information. And I think that a lot of times when people are learning, they're not really learning things. They're trying to like get some information to do a thing. I think the experiential aspects of these craftsmanship is where you develop taste. The computer does not have taste, right? The algorithm does not have taste, right? People have taste. That's why magazines are still more beautiful than Pinterest, right? Because humans are putting the things in places, and then you could see I don't know if I'm the only one, but you can see the human in design, right? And I could see it when someone uses an automated thing like Canva, right? Because everybody's work starts to look that way, right? So now personality becomes even more important, right? You can see your visual identity can separate you faster than ever before
Right.
if you have a perspective of how things should look and how things should be done. Because everybody else is just using templates. We've seen it. We've seen it. We've seen, oh, what's this? It's no better time than to develop a visual language for you to stand out,
It's
right?
awesome.
Because of the templates. Now, as far as my time goes, I am most valuable when my head is down, like when I'm writing or drawing to my company, right? And I'm also, but now my time is shifting where I'm more valuable to the company when I'm out talking about the vision of what we're trying to build, right? I built a great foundation because, like, when I'm doing game design and all these things, I am actually designing the systems in which all these things take place in,
Right.
right? So I'm a real big systems thinker. So like once I've started developing systems, early on, I didn't really do systems as much because I was trying to figure out who I was creatively or what my point of view on the world was. So
Right.
I would say I didn't even have a business with the imagination agency. I had a practice,
Right.
right? I wasn't in the book business. I wasn't in the mobile game business. I wasn't in the business of anything. I was in the practice of making. And I was able to sell some things so that I could continue making. But now I'm getting into where now it's like, oh yeah, this is the business.
Right.
And so a lot of my times now is like building out all the things I learned from over the year because of what would happen is I would walk around with the information in my head and everyone would have to hit me for the information of how to get things done.
Right.
The last 6 months, I've just been writing down all the systems in which I have created over the years and finalize it and package it into a singular thing, which anyone can join the company at any time and read the systems book, right? Like how do we greet a customer? How do we send an email? What does this email say? How do we design our books? What is the paper that we use?
How do you have all
You
that?
know,
How do you have all that organized? Is it just in documents? Do you, or what tools do you use?
I type it all up. I mean, my favorite device right now is this Remarkable.
I got that.
Oh man, I love. I'm like I need to do an advertisement for them. I love this thing. I got the Remarkable 2 Pro, whatever, with the
Yeah.
backlit.
Tell
Like
tell
I'm
so
a
tell our audience why it's so powerful. Like what do you use it for and how do you use it just so people understand?
So I'm a writer. I love to write things out. My company is a writing company. Like, and to have a leadership role, you have to learn how to write. I like to see the plans. I like this so everyone can read it. Because when we say it or we do, like someone wants to do a deck, the deck is just the bullet points. Anyone can do a deck. But then you leave that deck and be like, okay, so how do we do this?
Right.
Right? But if we give you all the information, this is how we do it. Like if there's a bullet point, then this is what's underneath that bullet point and how you get that thing done.
Right.
That's why I expect for everybody in leadership, don't just give me a bunch of bullet points to give to somebody from this thing. So we're a writing company, but I like to write by hand. So I love writing by hand. But the problem I would have hundreds and hundreds of notebooks
Right.
and like to find like, man, where did I write that one note at? Where did this one thing? So I still use notebook paper like when I'm going for a walk and things like that. I never would give up paper. But for a big body of my work now, so that I can move faster, I use the Remarkable because it is one excellent thing that can take notes. And I like it better than the iPad because it doesn't have applications.
Right.
There's no applications. I can pull a PDF in. I can go to the park draw without the distraction. I can leave my phone behind and still work. I can leave technology behind and still work. I have a hate-love relationship with technology. Like
Right.
I love it. I like it. There's a lot of things you can do with it, but I think there's a process. A part of my process is happens before technology. Nothing that I do starts with technology. Technology is the next step once I figure it out on paper. I like thinking on paper because I don't think that computers are fast enough to keep up with what I'm thinking.
So you write that on the pad and then you just upload it right to the computer?
You can, yeah. So I would do that and then I would type it.
Right.
So I'll edit my handwriting by typing it. So I'm looking at what I've written and then I'm getting a second edit. So by the time I send it out to the team, it's already fully flushed out,
How many people
ready to go.
how many people do you have on your team?
It fluctuates. So I run more of an a la carte style business. So I have a collection of collaborators that I will bring in when necessary. Because what happens was, like, if an animator is on staff and I'm not animating anything, I'm just paying them.
Right.
So I have to build up a trust of group of people that it's like, all right, we're ready to animate and bring everybody back on board. Like,
Right.
they're a group of freelancers. So the main team is just five,
Okay.
right? So it's like but like anytime, everything we do could be quite different.
Right.
Right. So if I am working on music, I have my music team, and then we'll work on music. I'll just do music for like 2 months with them, and then we'll knock out what we need. And then if there's some other stuff, we'll get back together accordingly. So I work more in an a la carte style but the hard problem is with that is teaching your languages, right, to a collection of people,
Right.
so that they could know how you do things.
Right.
So it's hard for freelancers to come over because they want to do things that, like, someone does something at Disney or how someone does something over there, but that's not the way that we do things here.
Right. How do you integrate AI into any of your work? Do you?
I use AI as a research assistant.
Okay.
That's the main thing that I use it for. Whenever I'm doing research, I do a lot of research. So that's the main way that I use AI right now. I haven't really, I mean, of course, in video games, there's artificial intelligence that's
Right.
always there
You
that you
know,
have to build out.
I've launched a few apps, and I had a couple companies where I was just heavily involved in the development of software, and I was really in the weeds. I mean, I was every detail, everything, and then we came across a company that could build with no code, so it was a lot easier and a lot faster. So I'm curious, your experience. Do you outsource all of that, or are you doing a lot of the work?
So I do a lot of pretty much all of the preliminary work, right? From, the game logic to the flow percentages. I do all the math. I don't know why, but I do all because I like to learn how things work and what we're going to build, because it's my job to see more possibilities within the infrastructure of which I'm designing. When someone else makes something for you and you just give it off to them, like, it's harder to see the possibilities and what that thing can do.
Right.
Now, I would say what I kind of wouldn't done in the past that ended up being more expensive is just vertically innovation from bottom up, where I would have just did some up and more lateral. So it's like, how much technology do we need to build, and how much technology can we borrow?
Right.
So borrowed technology is great because you can laterally innovate with the borrowed technology. Oh, this is already here. We just need to touch the code up to make it do this, this, and that. But this doesn't exist, so we need to build this engine, in a vertical manner. But I think it needs to go more of a slope versus a skyscraper, right? It needs to be more of a hill where you're
Right.
doing both lateral and vertical at the same time.
Right.
I didn't do a good job at that. It ended up being more expensive because you don't have a product to get out until the entire thing is innovated.
Right.
But you realize that, like, some of the simplest things, right, or it's already a good product. Just because you can see the final product, you can grow your customer along the way and build it for them. Now you got more updates for them along the way versus thinking like you got to have this fully fledged thing. But I think that's also was part of ego early on, of being like, you have to prove that I can make this beautiful thing, right? When, a lot of companies will put something out there, it ain't even ready to go. But I feel like as an underdog, you feel like I have to compete at this highest level to make sure that they know that I can do what they're doing and that we're just as special as them. But then there's something really handsome about, the grit, like bringing the customer along of the story, because now businesses are the focal point,
Right.
right? The people that run the businesses have become the focus point now. So people buy into people, and then they buy into those businesses.
Right.
Well, it used to be like businesses used to be the stars. Like, oh, IBM is here. Now we want to know who the CEO of IBM is.
Right.
And I think CEOs are trash today. I don't think there's a lot of great CEOs in the world that's at the top positions leading the world. I don't think that the the CEOs now are leaders of companies. They're not world leaders, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
They only do what's best for the company, not what's best for the world. And I was talking to my wife the other day, and I told her that I don't think that the way that CEOs are moving today would be possible if Steve Jobs was still alive, right? Because he kind of had this thing about him where he always talked about humanity. There hasn't been any CEOs that talk about humanity since Steve Jobs. I think that changed the landscape of what a CEO was and was supposed to be doing. Now the stars are like the Jeff Bezos and the biggest, the Mark Zuckerberg. What the hell does he know? You know, like those types of people that also have identity crisis, right? Like you could tell that the leader of Facebook or Meta doesn't know who he is, right? You could tell that the leader of Tesla doesn't know who he is. He's trying to self-actualize and let other people help him become what he think he should be, but he doesn't know who he is. When you have a leader that's like Steve Jobs that knows who he is, what he represents, it becomes really special. We don't have that type of leadership right now. I mean, you could look at Bob Iger and you could tell that Bob Iger knows who he is, right? You know, you could tell that when he speaks what he believes in, you can see that it kind of matches up with what Disney is. But he's also part of a company that's, one of the biggest in the world. But like, I remember guys like Tom Kalinske from Sega and Barbie. Them CEOs they were real rock stars. Those leaders, they were changing things. Not all the leaders are trying to do is change. They all fighting to be billionaires. Like they just want to be more rich than the other rich guy. And it's like, yo, like, what happened to like trying to improve the world? Amazon was to get people products faster. You know, Tesla was supposed to be like this electric car company that changing the landscape of climate change. Like the climate change was a huge part of like the Teslas is one of the worst cars designed and built. They're trash. They're just Apple stores on wheels, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's like you look at what people are actually doing in a product and you realize that the product is falling apart because the leadership is falling apart. They all have identity crisis. They don't know who they are. They want to hang out. They know who they want to be, but they don't know who they are.
So I have so I've been
Sorry
burned.
about that. I'm
No,
just
no, you know what? I love it. I love it. You got a really strong worldview, and I always have a lot of respect for people who know what they believe because I like you, I know how hard it is to one figure out who you are. You know, I have a leadership development community and an app, and I'm a coach, and I've been coached for the last 15 years, and our framework is all about figuring out what do you believe, who are you, what do you stand for, and what are you aiming at. And I coach a lot of young professionals, and so my question to you before I share a little bit about how I see that. When you're mentoring people and you see these young kids, and it's so bad right now because like the way I see it, you got two choices. You're either going to fit in and be really uncomfortable because you're going to live a double life because you have to fit in and you're going to feel that cognitive dissonance and you're going to be a mess inside, or you're going to be an outlier and you're going to be alone and it's going to hurt because you're going to be different because you want to be exceptional and it's not the norm and it's not popular. And when people see you changing, it's going to make them feel a little uncomfortable. And instead of them seeing it as growth, they're like, what's wrong with you? Why are you different? Why are you changing? And so either way you take it, life is hard. It is hard, but you have a choice, right? So my question to you is like, when you think about mentoring, when you think about young professionals, you think about these kids coming out of college, how do they figure out what they believe and who they are when they literally have in their pockets 6 to 7 hours a day algorithms throwing the worldview of the other people's worldview onto them? How does someone figure it out? How did you figure it out?
I think the biggest thing I would say is that one, you got to operate outside of the algorithm, right? Like we could talk about AI, we could talk about algorithms, we could talk about all these things, but none of those things happen. Like there's no AI in this room. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no
Yet,
AI.
yet,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, just like for us to interact with human to human, there's no like that's only on technology,
Right.
right? You're not going to find yourself on technology. You're going to find yourself out in Japan in a Shinto shrine, right, talking to a miho. You're going to find yourself, in a cabin in the woods at Coachella before you find yourself on Instagram, right? And what happens is that Instagram tells you who it wants you to be so it can easily put you where it needs to push you, right? But the last thing you need, and when I mentor, I never tell anyone who to be. It's not my job. I don't know who you're going to be, what you want to be. Our job is to try to help you navigate the spaces in order to become what it is that you're going to become. And as a mentor, it's almost a lot like watering a seed, right? You could just water it, but you can't tell that seed when to bloom, right? We don't get to choose when the seed blooms. We may know what seasons things bloom and different things like that, but people are such a variety of seeds, right? And then you start to figure out what plants and what makes them goes and what soil do they need to be. Because sometimes for some kids, they just need a different location with more like-minded people, right? So I think that when you navigate in these spaces of self-actualization, the real thing is to be independent in thought, but that doesn't mean that you can't participate in the community as well. Like that's the biggest thing. It's like you get the realm hop, right? You get to stay in your world, you can hop in other worlds, but that's easier to do when you know who you are.
Right. But how do you figure that out? So you said it's those opportunities. What I heard you say is in solitude, away from the tech, away from the day-to-day busyness, right? I mean, I'm a believer. I mean, look, I say it all the time, leaders are writers. And writing for me gives me clarity because I've got so many thoughts and so many ideas and it just slows me down. And part of our leadership
Right.
program is you got to stop and you got to write. And the funny is people don't want to write. They don't want to spend the time. It's hard for them. Same with reading. They don't want to read, you know? And so is the answer just, you got to just force yourself to do it?
Well, I think the thing is, it's like the first thing you got to do to figure out who you are is spend time with yourself, right? That's when you say solitude, that's time for like self-reflection. Like we always say that, that if you look into a pond while there's ripples, the reflection you see is only what you want to see, all of the noise. If you want to see a true reflection, you must go to the pond when the pond is still. Then you get a true reflection. The world is a lot of noise, there's a lot of ripple effects, and you think you see yourself, but you don't. But if you spend time under a tree, I'm guarantee you that you're more likely to find yourself sitting under a tree than you would to find yourself sitting in a chair scrolling on Instagram. I think that it's this thing that if we want to reconnect with our human nature, we got to create a reconnect with Mother Nature. I think there's the thing that humanity is missing is a connection with nature. We are too far removed from the dirt. And once you get back to the dirt and once you get there, you start to realize how small and insignificant that you really are when you stand next to a tree that's 100 feet tall. You're like, man, dang, and this tree has been here for 100 years. I'm lucky to be see 38. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like so. Like I think if you want to find yourself, is you gotta be okay spending time by yourself. And I think what writing does and what conversation does, like talk to a stranger, talk to people. I go to a coffee shop and I talk to strangers all the time and you really discover who you are and you meet yourself through dialogue. And I think when you write, it's when you get to meet yourself. When we talk, it's interesting because I always say that a breeze can take the words wherever they want to go. But when it's in paper, it's right where I put it. It's right there. It's right in the order. If I want to put this word before this word, I can do that, and it stays there. But when I say something to somebody, what I say has to be interpreted in a way, and it doesn't stay. Right? It does not stay, and that's why That's why I believe leaders are also have to be writers because now you can return to it. Right? It's the systems. Oh, what do we have to do again? Bam! Oh, I could do that. Right? So I think that's the thing about self-discovery. But I think it's life. I don't think also you can't think that who you are today is who you're going to be tomorrow. That's the biggest thing. It's like self-discovery, you have to be a lifelong learner,
Right.
right? Because we just don't know who we are because we haven't been put in several different positions to challenge a version of ourselves. So if you stay within the same bubble, that version of yourself that you currently exist as has never been challenged or pushed or prod to become something more. You got to stay malleable. You got to stay a piece of clay, and you got to be able to shape and change your perspectives. And because if you change your perspective, you could change your life.
I hear that. I hear that. Um,
Sorry, I like talking about this stuff.
I do too. I do too. In fact, I wrote a blog this morning, and in it, ironically, I'll send it to you after this. It says, "Change your perspective, change your life." And
Ah, come on, man, that's plagiarism.
and I got to tell you, I yesterday I was coaching. We coach at Ohio State, athletic teams at Ohio State. We have about 9 clients that use our company, Built to Lead. And I was working with one of the teams yesterday, and we were talking about adjusting your mirrors. Like, in your car, your mirrors, you adjust them, but you got blind spots. And if you adjust them right, there's no blind spot. Yet at going down the highway at 70 miles per hour, we're still looking over our head 70 miles per hour because we don't trust that we're actually seeing what we see. And I believe you got to have truth tellers in your life who will knock you upside your head with something you can't see, because you can't do it alone. You've got to be able to change your perspective. And we all have that perception. We have a perception, which is our reality. But when you have a truth teller who can hit you with something that you can't see, it changes your perspective. And when you can change your perspective, you change your life. And I, as an entrepreneur, I have had my mind blown by guys who have been there and done it. Things that I've tried to figure out in my business for years. And meanwhile, some guy at a table around a circle sharing his experience made me go, oh my gosh, like, I was thinking the exact opposite, and what you just said made complete sense. And I believe that when that happens, because that happens, and that's proof that you don't know everything, well, then that can keep happening. So at the end of the day, how much do you really know? Very, very little.
Right, you don't know anything. Like people be like, oh, you're so. I'm like, man, I don't know. People ask me questions. I'm like, I don't know. Right? I tell my team that all the time. Like, I don't have the answers. I could just tell you what I think. There's probably more ways to get this done than what I'm saying. If y'all discover it, share it with me so that I too can learn a better way of doing it. But for right now, this is what I have to give you. Now, I'm always coming back. The harder thing is when you're building something and you're learning as you go, is when you have an aha moment. You just like, oh man, all the shit we did was wrong. You're like, oh man, like it could be. But the thing is, you don't know where that lesson is going to come from. It
Absolutely.
could come from watching. I was watching National Geographic, and you'll see like, oh man, look at we had this big problem, like say sales is always the problem, right? But the problem is like, you can only hire so much of a sales force because you got to sell things in order to have people to sell things, but then you got to teach people how to sell things. But then when you're not in the business of selling a singular idea like a book or a game, or you're just not in the gaming business, then sales become a lot more difficult for someone to sell a variety of things.
Right.
So then I started thinking about sales, but then one day I was watching, there's like this every time there's in the ocean is very interesting. There's this time of year where all these fish will be swimming, right? Like a school of um, cod or something like, I think freshwater cod may be a freshwater fish, but whatever it is, say sardines, right? Or whatever the thing is swimming, the silverfish, right? There's this whole thing, a school of fish, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Their advice has gotten me through life a lot too. Dory, just keep swimming. Sometimes you're like, oh man, just gotta keep swimming,
Keep
just keep
going.
swimming. But there was a scene where I was thinking about sales and how we can do it, and it's like we had one person, working on it, and it's a tough job, because it's like, oh, you gotta generate these sales, do these things. But then I was watching National Geographic one night, and there was this fish, and there's so many fish that in order for every animal to eat out of the school of fish, there were sharks, there were seals, there was birds, there was dolphins, there was whales. And what would happen is the dolphins would attack from below to keep the fish up, and the birds would attack from this, but then the sharks and everything else would eat at the same. At this time, all these things could eat each other, but they were working together in order to eat as many fish as possible so that they all could eat. And then I started thinking like, well, why don't we attack the sales thing in the same exact way where one day a week we all do it, right? Like I'm sending emails, you sending emails, you sending emails, you sending emails, and then you handle the back end of like what we have been able to prove on sales, and now this big problem for one person has been eaten by us all.
Nice.
And I just remember watching that. I don't, all day I'm trying to figure out how to solve the sales issue, and it's like look, the fish just did it, I'm a whale, you're a shark, you're like none of us have this is none of our jobs, right? It's not the bird's job, it's not the shark's job, it's not their job, but if we all chip in,
It's all of our jobs.
it's all our job because we don't have no jobs
Right.
if we don't
Right.
if we don't sell nothing.
Right. I was thinking about that. Let me ask you a question. I've interviewed a lot of professional athletes, and there's two schools of not thought, but two schools of like positions. One where guys are set up and they're doing it for purpose. They don't need the money because they made the money. They're smart with the money, and they see it as a result of putting out good work, value, and then they'll get paid. And then there are those who are in a different position where they need to make money. Like, like I did well, but like I spent a lot too, and I need to create that income. Which camp do you fall in, and how?
I'm trying to make some money.
So tell me about that. So how much does it play into what you're doing? And feel free to plug whatever you're working on right now as we wrap up the interview.
I mean, the whole thing is like I've never had an investor. So I played football in order to invest in my imagination,
Okay.
right? And my whole thing was like football wasn't my plan A. I didn't make as much money as a lot of people were making in the NFL, right? And then, making a product, I think that people don't realize how much it costs to actually manufacture anything, right? Any type of
Wait a minute,
product.
man, back up. Wait, what did I read about your ring?
As far as what?
It sold. I saw.
Oh, you mean I sell everything. I sell everything all the time. I sell paintings. Like I don't like to me it's not
Your Super Bowl ring. That wasn't something that was so meaningful. You're just done.
I got a good offer for it and I was like, shit, what I'm gonna do, die with it? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, good shit. I needed some extra cash flow at the time too for the business. Like shit. That Super Bowl ring turns into developing the game. I'd rather have the game than the Super Bowl ring.
For sure.
Personally, I'd rather build the app than to do that. And it's like, well, you gotta be financially smart. So sometimes you hit your budgets. It's like, well, I can't go against this budget, but then someone make me a good offer. I'd rather get this and go above budget than,
Right.
product moving slow. So like
I'm
for
curious.
me,
How did you go about selling it? You just got an auction, or how did you do that?
went to the auction. I have a friend that like so I've always sold shoes, cleats, gloves, everything that we play for that anybody would pay for. I'm a product guy. It's just another product to me.
Right.
I make beautiful paintings. I sell paintings, I sell furniture, I'm a salesman. You got the right I sell kids clothes, I do everything. So like for me it's really about how can I sustain the space of being able to make things, right? Like
Right.
to me, the ring doesn't add any value to my life or it makes me feel any type of way when I look at it. So it's like,
Right.
shit, those are one of the easiest things that
What did you get for the ring? How much was the ring worth?
it was worth good, like over 75. So
Was it?
yeah.
Wow. That is awesome. That is awesome. I love that there's an attachment to it based on what it means, but not enough where it's so meaningful that you want to, like you said, die with it. And I sold my business and I downsized instead of upsizing, which everyone usually does when they sell their business. I did well, thank God. And then I downsized. And I think about like my kids, they'll say to me, man, I miss that house, the pool. And I'm like, it's funny. I don't. I just I had no attachment to it.
Me neither. I've been downsizing every year of my life because I realized like for me, I don't want things sitting around. Like I'd rather be able to make something and put that out into the world. So it's like my value in self is not tied. My identity is not tied. Like I don't look at that and it's like my identity of who I am as a person is tied to
Right.
the object. It's not a Horcrux. It's not like I'm Voldemort, and I'm putting my soul in
Right.
these pieces. But I'm a business guy, like, and I learned that like, if someone came to the house and be like, hey, I was living in a house and somebody's like, we want to buy this house. I wasn't planning on moving, but hey, like, what you got? You know what I'm saying? Baby, this is a good offer. I think we should sell the house. Like, we could get another house. Like, I'm that guy, like if
Right.
I didn't build a house from scratch, like if I built the house from ground up and designed it, but like I didn't even build this thing. It's like, okay,
Right.
tell me what you're thinking.
Right.
Come on in for coffee, like, okay, we could be out of here in 3 months, right? Oh, cool. What are we gonna do? I'll figure it out. So I'm a guy that which, I think that also I think sometimes too what happens when you start businesses, um, I think a lot of times, especially if you live a public life, I think there's an embarrassment that people have this sense of embarrassment when business doesn't go well.
It's hard.
Right. Yeah, it's hard, especially if you're in the public eye. Like I don't have a sense of embarrassment from trying to. I mean, I probably would be embarrassed if I gambled my life away in like in the casino or some shit. But like,
It's really
I
interesting you say
know,
that. Yeah, because for me, and I'm going through a little bit of a personal journey on my own, which is that I've gotten a lot of that validation from a lot of my success from athletics, from business, from winning. And now that I'm into some new endeavors that take time and you don't feel like you're winning, you know, there is this feeling like where do you get that fulfillment from, right? And so it's hard because when you're used to winning and you've got that winning mentality and you have success behind you, when you do come across something and you're not winning, it's a hard thing. You got to be able to really sit with that, and you got to really be able to realize that what you did in the past does not prove that what's going to happen. It's not past performance doesn't necessarily prove future performance, and does that validation mean you're successful or not? And it's a hard thing to grapple with.
Well, I think it would be if my career wasn't the way that it went. I think that I learned to give my best even when we were losing. So I didn't tie myself to the wins, losses, and my self effort, like and the things I was doing. I would say that, like, I also realized that we weren't always winners,
Right.
right? Like, I wasn't always the best. Like, like when you start something, it took me 20 years to make it to the NFL.
Right.
That's 20 years of practice to get to the highest level of what it is. Like, why? Who am I to have so much ego that I think as soon as I pick this up, I'm supposed to be the best person at it ever?
So how do you extrapolate that to your business now? What's the hardest thing you what's the hardest struggle you have right now?
I think the hardest thing is just like the consistency in moving a product, right? Like the ebbs and flows of it, right? Like just that, the everyday, and then also the um that, and then I think the other thing too that we're looking at, like early on, I would say that I put there's a lot of intelligence, but it's all into different things, right? Like we have a lot of intelligence into making a children's book, but every children's book has been a different character, except for the first series, which is now animated, fully animated series that's coming on to Disney and Disney Plus. So I sold the rights to do the show with Disney. We do the show over there. But the thing was, it's like I only made two books of that character. I got six, seven books, but each book is a different character.
Right.
You get older, you're like, well, we just did seven books of the same character. That brand would have been bigger within this thing. But as an individual author, you're making a plethora of stories in all these different spaces.
Right.
So, and then you'll do the interactive children book apps, but that's a different book as well. And then you'll do the games, and that's a different character
Right.
as well. So, really, you get to the point for me, I think the biggest thing was like, how do I take all of my intelligence and build it and put it into one product? Right? That's been the biggest thing to this. But then you also have the legacy business where you're trying to put all this intelligence into one product. You still have the legacy of selling the books and all the other products. So those things don't die off,
Right.
right? So it's like, how do you develop a legacy side while also try to move forward to do what you know is right? So the feedback loop is one of the hardest things. Like you want to make changes, but then you get caught up back in the same cycle of making this work while you also trying to change the system in which everything is operating in. So how do you shorten the feedback loop? And then the other thing I would say that I made since I was playing, all of my bets were long term because I didn't have to make as much money right away.
Right. Right.
But then, so some of those long term plays, like they just not starting to, find their way. Some of those long term plays didn't come out the way that you would think they would came out in the long term
Sure.
as well.
Sure.
So you're dealing with the low feedback loop from that investment of your imagination. I call it what I call a return on imagination, like how much time, effort went in this, and then when do you get your money back on this thing? So now I need short term, mid term, and long term projects always working. So there's something that's faster. So we create a faster product that can be developed faster and put more out. And then you got this mid one, which is like all of these are updates to any of the big products or the smaller products. And then you have your blockbuster product, which is the long
Right.
term one.
I got two more questions. One, if you and I are having this conversation 12 months from now, and we're looking at 12, 24 months from now, a year or two from now, and we're looking back at the last year or two, what has to happen for you to be happy with your progress?
Yeah, I would say that for me, I think it's you know, that's a good question. I think that for me, a lot of it has to be built around the new mobile game that I have. I have to get this mobile game off the ground because I feel like it's the best product, and that product is the one that I want to pour all of my intelligence in moving forward. Because from that, I could build the games, the books, the music, all of that's tied into a singular product. That's good. That's where I want to put all my intelligence in that. And then, but what needs to happen is we need to develop a great infrastructure. First, we need to build a better mailing list, right? We need to build a better mailing list to more inform our people not only of what we're doing, but how I'm thinking, right? Not just to give them products, but the essays and papers that I've been writing on different philosophies, so they can know what I'm thinking and the type of vision I have for the world. So we need to get the vision. I need to get the vision out in as many ways as possible. I need to write about it. I need to do interviews about it. I need to do this so people could know why I exist and what I'm working to achieve in the world, right? To make the world a more playful place, right? To liberate the Black imagination. I need to go out there and tell that story as well and let people ask me questions about it so people can see how much conviction I have in those things as well. So I think one is about sharing the story on every platform possible and having discourse around the subject. More lectures at universities, also to introduce the philosophy so that the next generation can take them and build the world that they wish existed. Then we have to build a robust mailing list, make sure that we can inform our audience on what we have to offer and why it's the best thing on the offer, or why it's good for them in their lives, and also grow the mailing list. Not so much focus on social media because you have no control on social media and that reach. If I email you, at least I know it's going to get in your inbox.
Right.
And then I think the other thing is just the consistency and balance of the rollout schedule of products, right? Like, so that way it feels new, feels new, feels new, feels new. So we can stay at the front of their mind versus hitting them hard and then not getting back to them in another months because of how long it takes to manufacture a product at our current pace due to the lack of infrastructure in some areas.
So,
That's what I think I need to do in
so
order
let me
to.
ask you a question. I love the answer. Let me ask you a question. I was thinking this. I wasn't gonna ask it, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. Why Black imagination? Why not Jewish? Why not something else? Tell me what's behind that, because I want to imagine too.
Now, so my thing is that's the whole thing. When I say liberate the Black imagination, it's coming more from the aspect of the Black imagination making the object, right? Anybody, my whole thing is that anybody in the world to liberate the Black imagination, I got to have as many people possible to come play in my Black imagination. What I think about the Black imagination is usually when we go to make a product, it's under the infrastructure of the white imagination, right? I'm at Nickelodeon, I'm at Cartoon Network, so therefore I don't get the full freedom of my Blackness in my storytelling because they also want to see themselves within those stories.
Right.
So for me, when I say the liberation of the Black imagination, it's more about the liberation of like what's possible, right? To see more for ourselves, to grow those things, and in those things everybody could come play in our imagination, but I don't want anyone shaping the things or
Love
the
it.
way that I want the world to be. So that's when I say liberation of the Black imagination is more of a philosophical approach about the possibilities of what you can imagine for yourself as a Black person, right? And that's why I write books that's focused on play and imagination, and they're doing kung fu. There's these different worlds versus just being on the likeness of being Black, right? Because when I see a Black story, I see a human story,
Right.
right? But since the character is Black, a lot of people don't feel like they can, relate to that character because, or they're not supposed to because it's a Black story. No, a Black story is everybody's story, right? Like we have shared experiences. There's not a story that I can't tell about my uncle that you can't find that you got an uncle that's probably the same way.
Right.
But as a creator, right? You got to be able to have your voice to paint the pictures that you wish existed of the people that you represent. So that it doesn't become representation, but it becomes a reflection of your Black experience because Black experience is not monolithic. So what is your liberate all of us by everyone being able to tell the exact stories, draw the pictures that they want of their Blackness for us all to experience holistically.
Love it. I love it. I appreciate your being direct about that, and making me feel comfortable that I can ask you a question like that. Last question.
For sure. Nah, again, I say this is why it's good to have conversation. It's
Yeah,
not about, how can I make a product if I'm only making a product for Black
of
people?
course, of
Right.
course.
Right. Like my thing is, I want to take my Black imagination and scale it. Right. So for me to scale it, I got to be able to take it into a mini. I want to be my books translated in Japanese. Right. You know what
Of
I'm saying?
course, sure.
Like, in 1,000 languages. Right.
And now you can. Now you can do it.
I could just get AI.
Right. Right. It's crazy. So I have an interview series that I have. It's called 10 Things People Ought to Know. And I capture people's thoughts. I'm like, just what do you think people ought to know? So if you were just off the top of your head, like, here's some things that people ought to know, what would you say?
10 things.
You don't have to say 10, just a few, just something, anything off the top of your head.
Oh, I would say that nature is above man. Man lives with nature. Nature does not live with man. That'll be the first thing I think people just ought to know. I think that the other thing people ought to know is that the world is not bad, right? There's a lot of good that's always happening in the world, but we get caught up in these cycles of thinking that everything is all bad because the bad gets promoted. There's more people doing good in the world than there are doing bad in the world. And I think that people must, I don't know, they ought to know, but people must train themselves to see the brighter side of things. right? Like just learn how to see the brighter side of things. Like, I hate when people be like, "Oh, you always see the brighter side of things." I'm like, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you want me to do? Just stand in the shadow? Nah, I want to see the brighter side of things. I have to. That's how I keep moving in life. I think the other thing is that we should play more, right? I think people should go out and play. I think the thing that's missing from society is playing together. Um, I think we don't play with, enough people from enough places. And I think it's always interesting because the Olympics bring more people together than anything else, and it's just to watch people play.
It's true.
Everybody's playing something, and we all different places, different. That's why sports are great, right? It brings people together to play. Even if you play basketball with the homies like that, your basketball group may not look like your work group, right? And I think it's to build more worlds in which we can play together in. I would also say, it's true that black don't crack. People ought to know that. Um, I'll also say that we are also all in charge of what tomorrow looks like. Like, the future, like when we think about the future, a lot of people only think about the children, but the future is for us as well, right? Like the adults of the world, the grandparents of the world, their future can be better just as fast as our children's futures can be better. So, and when you look at the future just for children, you always look at it as like, oh, they got time. But when you look at future for yourself, you may not look at it in a way where you feel like, well, I have time. So work to make the changes that you want to change the things that you want to change, write about the things you want to change, shout about the things you want to change, tell people the things that you want to change, and also do something about it, right? Like, if you see something that you want to like, go do it yourself, right? Like you want to, you don't like the way, you know, if you don't like the fact that they're banning books, then go buy banned books and give them to kids at the school, right? If you or read them or build a reading community reading group and read the books, like why is it if it's the schoolhouse, that doesn't mean that we can't have access to these books and give these books to people we feel like they should be read. Read them, right? It's also crazy that somebody wants to ban a book. But then you think about America. America is not crazy for America because America made it illegal for black people to be able to read books and to be able to write. So of course they would ban books. Now you think about it when people get upset. This is the thing. I just thought about this. This is my first time thinking about this thought right now I'm about to say. When you think about people getting upset about banning a couple of books, right? Think about being a group of people in which all books were banned from. The outrage that we have right now for the 10, 20, 30 books that's being banned, and then the outrage that no one had when the entire libraries in schools were banned from a group of people because of the color of their
Let me
skin.
tell you something, man. I studied Jewish history as an observant Jew, and I got to tell you, throughout thousands of years, they used to put them in wheelbarrows and burn them all. And entire communities, all their books, every Jewish scripture, everything burned in the ground. But somehow truth and somehow faith, it has a way of outlasting all that hate, and we're still around.
I think there's some things, Booker T. Washington in his book Up From Slavery, he wrote a lot about the Jewish
Yeah,
community.
yeah.
Right. I think that, there's a lot of things in which the Jewish community does very well of like, making sure that the history is strong, making sure that we are a community, all right, make sure that we're looking out for each other.
Well, look, yeah, if you look at Israel, I mean, they're surrounded by every country that outwardly says you do not deserve to live. We're going to wipe you off the face of the earth, and no one says a word, but they're still there. And when 5,000 missiles get shot off and nothing hits, like it's an open miracle. People don't talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. They ignore it. But you only see what you see, and you got to have your eyes open. You got to look, and you could read scripture, you can go back, you could read the Bible, you could do all that stuff, but like. Those aren't just stories. It's real stuff, man. Thousands of years, that stuff has been around. And now we're, living in this world where, like you said, everyone's promoting hate. They're promoting whatever will get views and likes and impressions. And it's not usually what's good. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is with those things too, it's like, it's interesting. That conversation is interesting because it's like you can see you know, the Jewish communities, right? Like when you say from the history, that you guys have, and then like being black, I could also see the history of the Palestinians,
For sure.
right? Like I could see both. Like I could see, I could see, because to be black is to be oppressed. So like we understand oppression at a level of like, well, I could see the oppression there, I could see the oppression here, I could see all the
It's everywhere.
oppression.
It's everywhere. Look, I always say, like, and I always say, if you grew up in Palestine, that's all you see. What do you think they're going to think? It makes sense. Like, you can't step outside of it and only go on one side. You have to look at both sides, and nothing's perfect. And
My question would be, this is like also just going back to play. How often does a Jewish kid and a Palestinian kid play together?
well, it's a good question. I mean, I have a lot of friends in Israel, and there are a lot of Palestinians, and a huge Arab population lives in Israel. I mean, you're talking about millions of Arabs and Palestinians living in Israel together peacefully. By the way, where they do play. Now, on the other side, you're not going to see any Jewish people outside of that because they'll get their heads ripped off. So you can't do that. But I think there is something to be said.
But would you want to live in Palestine with the
No,
way that it's
I
set
can't.
up?
I wouldn't be able to. I'd have my head ripped off in 2 seconds. But I know when I'm in Jerusalem and I go over to that Kosel, the Wailing Wall, I see every religion there all coming together, playing really nicely. They do, and it's a special place, man. And you're blessed if you can go there, because for thousands of years you couldn't go there. And once the 1967 war kind of broke it out and freed it up, and now people can go, you're free to go. You can go there today. You can stand right next to a Jew, a Muslim, and a Christian, and everything's peaceful and it's good. And that's one of the few places in the world you could do that and play nicely. I mean, to me, that's a special place. I mean,
In 1967 is crazy because we were still trying to get the right to vote. You know what I'm saying? Like
right,
here in America, you know what I'm saying? So it's like,
of
right,
course.
like we still trying to, the systems and, to overcome the systems here in America, so it's like,
Not
I get
easy.
it.
It's hard stuff, man. Hard stuff. You are an awesome interview. I really appreciate your time. And how can people find you, learn about you? Where can they go to visit? All your good stuff.
Yeah, you can go to tominoshi.com for to check out the products and the experiences that we have coming, and then you can follow me on social media. I just Mr. Tominoshi. Sign up for the mailing list if you go to the website, and then that's how you can really stay up to date. And also, I just started a Substack to start writing about a lot of the things that we are talking about as well,
Cool.
because I just wanted to write more, and it's like no one reads the caption on Instagram or anything like that. So it's just start writing, and my Substack is just Mr. Tominoshi as well. So I'm just writing a collection of essays, things like that. But these will also be in my emailing list as
Awesome.
well. So
Well, may you be blessed with a ton of success and an abundance of making the impact that you want to make with all the kids, and spreading that imagination and that visionary mind you got. And nothing but love and lots of luck to you.
thank you, brother, man. I hope you have a great day. I appreciate you having me. I enjoyed the conversation too.
That's good.